Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo story. Proceedings in both houses of the parliament were adjourned today after a ruckus erupted over the developments of the Adani case. The opposition members have been demanding a discussion on the Hindenberg report and the steep fall in share prices of Adani Group companies. The opposition has also sought a joint parliamentary committee or a Supreme Court monitored panel to inquire into this. The Hindenburg report has accused billionaire Gautam Adani's companies of brazen stock manipulation and accounting fraud scheme over the course of decades. The government is saying that it has nothing to do with the matter and the opposition is raising it and it has no other issue to raise. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has reacted to Adani crisis in an interview to News 18. She has said India's financial sector is very well regulated, and one instance, no matter how much is talked about globally, is not going to be indicative of how well Indian financial markets have been governed. Meanwhile, Congress has said that it will hold nationwide protests in front of LIC offices and State Bank of India branch on February 6. To speak on this issue, we're joined by an eminent panel. We're joined by Basant Maheshwari, who's an investor and an author. Welcome to the show, sir. We are also joined by PKD Nambiar. He joins us now. He's a political analyst. We are also joined by Sandeep Ghosh, again a political analyst. Sanjay Jha also joins us, and Madhavan Narayanan, who is a senior journalist. Welcome all to the show. If I may start with you, Basant Maheshwari, a loss of more than $100 billion. This is massive, not just for Adani Group, but for the country as a whole. Do you think it will majorly impact the India story?
I mean, if you have a 3-5 year view, I don't think it's going to affect. We have seen many companies come and go, survive, have a problem and recover from that. But if you're looking for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I think this can really shake things up because today a company which is listed in the market, it doesn't live in isolation. It's connected to 200 other people. For example, there would be people who would have put 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, 50,000, 75,000 into these stocks, and nobody buys the stocks when they are at the lows. People normally get in once they start falling from the highs. So to that extent, these events have widespread ramifications. You might look at a mutual fund holding and say nobody owns it, but I've seen on the ground that people really have bought into the Adani shares because everyone comes to the market to make money, and that's how they've been impacted. So it's just a question of a vision. In 5 years and 3 years, nothing's going to change. We're going to live a little better and continue like the way it is. But if you're looking for the next 6 months, 12 months, I think if this problem isn't sorted out well, and when I say well, it means that the debt issue doesn't get over things, then I think it's going to be a huge issue and we might have to have face some problems.
Right. In the long term, maybe it may not be that much of a problem, but in the short term, there would definitely be problems. PKD Nambiar, you would agree to that?
Anything and everything we are a world wherein perception do matter. So with that regard, I think it does have some kind of ramifications, or whether it is an immediate one or a long term or a midterm, we don't know, but it does have. There is no doubt. But I think I would like to put it on a larger context. There is no doubt that Adani needs to come clean. If they are a listed company, we all wanted to know what is the truth behind all these kind of an accusation, whether it is a Hindenburg or is it from the left cronies or whatever we call it, or a media created, or sometimes people don't want it to see the rise of one particular organization or an individual in such a fast way that we have that in us to question, because we don't like somebody to grow. So it is important that Adani to come clean so that we don't discuss broadly. Then the other part of it, that is something more interesting, that if you really look at the overall market capitalization or the overall assets of Adani, almost 73 to 74% of the whole of Adani still is holded by Adani Group. I mean, Adani family holdings. About 20 odd percentage or a 22 percentage or so is are the FIIs, that is foreign investment on the Adani Group. So broadly, about three to three, less than 5% is the overall retail or institutional investments coming from India. Now, then suddenly there will be my friend Sanjay is there. He will be saying that the Modi's banks have given money to Adani just like left, right, and center. But then the basic fundamentals of a business comes in my mind that a bank gives a debt on behalf of a collateral, and that collateral in this case and Adani's businesses are predominantly a very fundamental core infra
Right.
projects which he cannot carry and fly away tomorrow morning. Like, he's not a
Right.
diamond merchant.
But
He
but
has got
but
ports, airports, and the energy sector. These are all available. You can see, feel, and you and me use it on a daily basis. So,
but
but
there is,
before I comes to the last one, I just want one more second, Sir Bhai,
yeah,
because
yeah,
this is a disclaimer, because then people will say that your Nambiar is here to Adani ko support karne ke liye baitha hua hai. No, I think one thing I expect from the government, there are almost, I think, 40%, 30% odd of our airports are now in other way, or one way or the other way is controlled by, or the transport airport
yeah,
is are with Adani. Same
yeah,
is in the case of ports. About, I think, almost 40% odd. It can be here and there. I don't know that. So that is also with Adani. So a large group like this, which has got a very significant activity in the very strategic places, I think government should also intervene and make sure that the
yeah,
story of Adani
right.
is good and will be good for the country and for the financial market.
Right. Sanjay Jha, facts and figures aside, but there's something called as perception. Perception is very important. One report and you see the Adani empire quite crumbling. That's also very important. The figures may say something else, but the perception is again there that cannot be ignored.
Zaffar, perceptions are based on figures, and
Yeah,
the figures are damning. And I speak here today not wearing the hat of a congressman, but I've been a banker, and I'm pretty much used to looking at the P&L and the balance sheets of companies. So let me just put it out in black and white. Number one, the market today is sending a message that they do not believe Mr. Adani's group. Mr. Adani withdrew the FPO,
yeah,
unprecedented.
yeah,
The Mr. Adani spoke to the investors. The investors are saying, "We do not believe you." Now, you'll find the BJP, unfortunately, being terribly irresponsible, but
yeah,
actually, literally behaving like they're lawyers for Mr. Adani. I mean, the BJP is going to town on social media saying, if you attack Adani, you're attacking India. I think they shamed this country by making this kind of equivalence. What is the truth? The Hindenburg report is a report of activist short sellers. And by the way, that does not make them unethical, because I have been part of the investing community. There are people that are there are bears and there are bulls. Mr. Maheshwari will tell you that. And but as long as they are taking a legitimate position, there is nothing wrong. After all, they have challenged Mr. Adani. They've thrown the gauntlet at him to say, if you
yeah,
believe that our figures are fictitious or fabricated,
yeah,
come and sue us in New York. Okay.
right,
So what is the truth today, Zafar? The
yeah,
truth today is that Mr. Adani's bonds, which are giving you yields of 30%, what does it tell you? It's a ridiculous level. Even junk bonds in America don't carry 10% returns. Mr. Adani's are at 30%, and they have been delisted from the Dow Jones. I mean, these
right,
are like serious indictment of the Adani Group. You have Credit Suisse and Citibank who have said we don't want to use the Adani bond as a collateral. And here you have a BJP that says this is an attack on India. I mean, the investors in India have knocked off $100 billion in market cap. And you're saying this is an opposition and anti-India conspiracy. I mean, this is so absurd and atrocious that Zafar, we need to call it out at the very beginning. This is absolute utter nonsense, and we need to call it out. And my second point, and I don't want to get into technical details, the second point, which is very fundamental here, is that end of day, where the closeness of Mr. Adani with Mr. Modi, that is the elephant in the room. Let's accept it. Mr. Adani would not have grown had he not had the generosity or the political patronage of the BJP. And as far as that linkage is concerned, I can tell you there are millions of articles out there in the public domain. I can tell you right now, how can a businessman with $120 billion of valuation have got 85% of that in the last 3 years? I mean, are we joking or what? So Indian regulators have been silent because they are fearful. I can tell you RBI and SEBI need to be taken to town. I'm sure this is just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. This is going to play out. My worry is that we will all end up paying a huge price because Mr.
Will
Modi and the
will
BJP have allowed Adani to balloon beyond normal
will
proportions.
yes, PKD. I know you want to come in, but let me get a quick word from Madhavan. We'll all end up paying a huge price. You agree?
Yeah, I think there is certainly a huge price, as in short-term uncertainty. I pretty much agree with Basant Maheshwari on market behavior, because market does not value claims by one party or the other. It looks at the details of the matter, it looks at the mood of the situation, and there are knock-on effects of various kinds. So let me say, I was on a panel with Basant yesterday, and there were four aspects to this. And those who are trying to indirectly or directly or softly or hardly defend Adani Group are using what I would call a strategy of confusion. See, there are four aspects to this: the legality of it, the uh, corporate governance aspects, which may not be legal but marks for good behavior. The third is, uh, you know, political connections or lack of it in terms of influence or disproportionate favor granted to Adani. The fourth is regulation from the point of view of the government and governance in India. Let me say at the very outset that market mood is badly affected, and to that extent, there's going to be a knock-on effect. But the good news for us is that Indian private mutual funds have not bought into the Adani story, which is also an elephant in the room. Because if what is it that they have or did not have that did not impress very educated fund managers following rules and principles of investment? This is the dog that did not bark. So the dog that does not bark is also a clue in a Sherlock Holmes business. So we need to know, why did Adani fail to impress domestic mutual funds? So that
Right.
is one thing. The second thing I want to say is that I agree with the finance minister that this is not a knock on the India story, because India is not just Gautam Adani. India is N.R. Narayan Murthy, India is Kiran Majumdar Shah, India is Ratan Tata, India has got lots and lots of bright youngsters and startups. Hindenberg, which brought out the report on Adani against the Adani Group, maybe with short selling and profit making ideas, but it very clearly says India is an emerging power. So one individual does not matter. But the key question to ask are two things. One is, 80% of what Gautam Adani has been doing, or the Adani Group has been doing, it's resulted in paper wealth of more than $100 billion, has been done and controlled by the public sector for the better part of the 75 years of independence before the Amrit Kal has been announced by the government. So, what is it? What are the qualifications of this man or group that made so much money flow into his thing? Group. So that brings us to the important point of regulation and governance, which is where I
Right.
think the Indian story is got to be affected from an investor's point of view. Everybody
Right.
wants rule of law. Everybody wants good governance. Markets have good players, bad players. Markets have a way of sorting out things. Sanjay Jha spoke about it
Right.
by bond yields or so. If in markets you put your money where your mouth is. So if
Right.
Adani Group is so good, then you should be putting your money and buying all the bonds that have a 30% yield. But from
Yeah.
a governance point of view, this is not just the India of Ratan Tata and Narayan Murthy. This is also the India of CAG, JPC, Supreme Court, media. They all have a right and a responsibility to examine all these details from various angles, whether it is valuation of shares, whether it's corporate governance. There are institutional advisory services that are independent. There are credit
Right.
rating companies,
Right.
Fitch and S&P.
India is not just Gautam Adani.
Let me complete what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Zaffar.
Yeah.
The point is that India's story will be affected adversely only if there is no meaningful inquiry and action on the controversial aspects taking place in the market. The Economic Affairs Secretary has made the first step by saying, look, let it play out in the market. Fine, great. But that doesn't leave many other questions, closed. There are open. So LIC and SBI. SBI has not only banking related exposure, it also has equity related exposure. SBI mutual fund has something like 6,000 crore, from what I understand, which involves debt funds, which will have your small savings or my small savings indirectly through various bonds or whatever. Second thing is, what all institutions, please understand, State Bank of India and LIC are not just private capital institutions. They are
Right.
officially declared as systemically important. They are also majority owned by the government of India and therefore the people of India. And
Right.
therefore, important point, please listen to me carefully. This is going to be where the complete needle will have to come in the coming days.
Yeah.
What are the institutional processes and regulations that govern investments and allocations? Don't talk. It's not just about whether it's 1% or 2% or 3%. It's all about what are the processes within that were followed or not followed. For that, an inquiry is absolutely necessary, whether it is by a combination of a SEBI or CAG or a Supreme Court appointed panel or a JPC. These are matters we can discuss.
Right.
Why not have all? I think
Right.
the point is various institutions, including the media. Media is
Right.
not recognized officially as an institution in India, but the Constitution of India grants us freedom of expression, and the government.
Let me go to Sandeep Ghosh.
Let
He's
me
been
just say that
waiting
all
very
these
patiently. Let
so
me go to
various
Sandeep
angles
Ghosh.
will
He's
be
been
explored and need to be explored.
okay. I think Sandeep Ghosh is left. But what what we're discussing here is that the implications of. I know PKD, you want to come in, but let's first play the sound bite of Chairman Rajya Sabha Jagdeep Dhankhar. In fact, there was a ruckus in the parliament, and the opposition parties really wanting discussion on this issue. Yeah, if we can have that soundbite up. Okay.
Parliament is the North Star of democracy. It is a place of discussion and deliberation to realize the aspirations and dreams of the people and not a place of disturbance. We are required to work in accordance with rules. I have gone through all these notices. I am unable to accede to them as these are not fulfilling the requirement of Rule 267 and are not in conformity with the direction by the chair on December 8, 2022. I appeal to the honorable members to maintain order so that the listed business of the House may be taken up. Honorable members have indicated important public interest points in their 0 hour and special mentions.
PKD Nambiar, what's the problem? Why can't there be a discussion in the parliament on this subject? It's caught the imagination of the entire country, and everybody's talking about it.
It's not the entire country. I think that's very far-fetched. I mean, maybe
but a lot of people,
maybe a
people
large
are.
number. So the people like us who sits on the TV studio and give our gyan does not mean that we are not the world. Just like Madhavan
Yes.
said that Adani is not India, India is not Adani. So yes,
Right.
we are not India either. So, but yes,
Right.
I am very clear. The corporate governance in our listed companies or even any private sector companies. I have been an entrepreneur for 20 years. I know that the importance of it. I consult large number of corporate houses. The corporate governance has been an issue culturally. It is not something like from the last 3 years or 4 years. It has further improved quite a bit after some of the corporate law and etc. had come in. So I believe as I said earlier, that Adani needs to come clean in the interest of the business community as a whole, and plus to the India story. Now coming to the two parts, that is where I was just raising my hand. One is Sanjay Jha said, my dear Sanjay ji, none of these chronic capitalists have born after Modi came into the power. Adani's story, Adani may have gone up in the last 4 years or 5 years or 6 years. That has nothing to do with the Modi, Narendra Modi, or for that matter to any other people. But the Mundra port which he is holding is not given to him by Narendra Modi or for that matter to a BJP. The Vizhinjam port, let me tell you this, one of the very strategic port in India, which is called as Vizhinjam port in Trivandrum, he was the only player. Was it given by Narendra Modi? Or even the left, some of the apostle of the left, that is Pinarayi Vijayan and the Congress, both the Umman Chandy and the Congress Chief Minister Umman Chandy and the CPIM Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan, they both were welcoming him with a red carpet to what not. And now you are talking about just 3 months back, there was the Christian community in that place was fighting against the Vizhinjam port. But what was the stand of the left chief minister then? So I think one side, the people, whether it is Congress to the left parties, were supporting the growth of Adani. And because he belongs to both the prime minister of the country and Adani belongs to a Gujarat, so you make a
Right.
mockery that it is all happening in
Okay.
Gujarat. My dear friend,
We'll,
that is a very illogical logic. No, no,
we'll
one more
allow
thing.
Sanjay.
No, no,
We'll
Safar.
allow Sanjay. Yeah, yeah. I'll come
No,
back
I
to
think
you
I want him to. No, no, Safar bhai, one more thing.
quickly.
See, why I'm saying is that it is not. See, as I said, there is कुछ तो काला है. अब वो कितना
Okay.
काला है, कितना नहीं है, that
Okay.
is the inquiry or anything will come.
Uh,
But why
before,
should the Parliament of India discuss a private company's market capital is going down?
because
Why should a
because
Parliament of
so
India should be discussing about an investment by LIC has invested anybody whomsoever
okay,
go
okay.
to a market, whether it is a government company or a private company,
we'll ask Sanjay
they know
Jha,
the risk. There is a risk always
but
attached to it.
before that, let me go to Basant Maheshwari. Uh, Adani Group is involved in a lot of infrastructure projects. Do you think after this crisis, the group will be able to deliver on those projects?
That's the biggest risk because infra is basically a long gestation output business model. So you put in money today, your money comes out after 3, 4, 5 years. Debt has to be serviced today. Just to share an example with you, they bought Ambuja cement from wholesale. They had to pay the money upfront. So Ambuja might be making money, but how does Mr. Adani make money out of Ambuja? He can make money only by dividends. Dividends will be declared after 12 months, and that too, the board will sit down and decide how much to pay. So the dividends are not enough to repay off the debt obligations. And that is why they needed this FPO. I mean, it was like a do or die for them. If there was no FPO, there are going to be huge things. And Zafar, what happens is what you see normally is not normal. So this means is if things go bad, they just don't go bad. They go from bad to worse and from worse to worst because something keeps propping up from somewhere. So there are so many projects, so many companies, all in expansion mode, rather super expansion mode. I don't know how all that is going to be handled. So that's the biggest worry for the group as a whole. But for the country and other things, I think we will get over it if you have a 1 year view. If you have a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 month view, then this is going to overcrowd. Just the last point. For the last 1 week, the entire globe has been rallying. The Nasdaq has gone up, the Dow has gone up, the global markets are going up, and we are held back because of these events. I mean, imagine a situation where the globe was falling. I mean, if the Dow was down 2,000 points, we would have matched the Dow shoulder to shoulder. We've just held on our own because there are such strong global tailwinds, and we haven't been able to capitalize on those tailwinds because of these incidents.
Right. Sanjay Jha, you were saying that Adani is not India, India is not Adani. Then why should Indian Parliament stop everything and discuss this issue? Why should there be a joint parliamentary committee? There are checks and balances. There is an investigation that's been initiated. So things will take its course.
Zafar, let me quickly respond to that question of yours. Number one, that was a response because Mr. Adani, clearly tutored by their political patrons, tried this act of having an Indian flag. And this CFO goes and talks about the British and Jallianwala Bagh. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was like a reality TV show. And what do you do when you don't have answers to questions raised by Hindenburg? You try and take refuge in nationalism and patriotism, which we all know is the refuge of the scoundrel. Now, let me answer your question to what my good friend PKD Nambiar, who, with due respect, made some very absurd and atrocious remarks. He says, why should the Indian Parliament be discussing a private limited company? Hello, good evening, PKD. Private limited company in Ambani. You guys made him the third richest man in the world. 85% of that in the last 3 years. Infrastructure projects have been given by government. Majority of them have been given by the government. You are accountable, my friend. You are accountable. And now let me tell you some hard data, my dear friend. You need to hear some hard data. Do you know? And Mr. I think Mr. Maheshwari will agree with this. In a same industry, you have one company with similar level of income or turnover or profit with a valuation in double digits, and you have Mr. Adani's valuation running at 700, 800%. In the last year of 2022, Mr. Nambiar, whether you have an Adani stock or not is immaterial. 80% of market cap growth came on the basis of one group, and you're telling me that everything is okay. I mean, where was Nirmala Sitaraman? Where was Prime Minister Modi? I mean, any other country, I'm going to tell you, Zafar, something which I think we need to call out here. Boris Johnson, Biden, Trump, anybody in a democratic country, if the prime minister was known to be close to an industrialist who had ripped apart the Dow Jones or NASDAQ or the London Stock Exchange, they would have been giving in their resignation letters even before an inquiry began. Let's not try and dodge this issue here. And let me make the crucial point that Hindenburg has said. Hindenburg actually says, PKD, exactly what you said, that Mr. Adani could be destroying an India story which has hope that Mr. Maheshwari believes in. Even I believe India has hope. But when you have crony capitalism being played out in broad daylight, it can destroy the story. I don't believe that this is a 6 month story. I can tell you, I've worked with a foreign bank before, not one, but quite a few. And I can tell you this, if they go bearish on India, if they begin to suspect Indian regulations, which Adani cases put it out in the open, we will go high on a country risk report. And then India can see a reversal of foreign portfolio investment, including, it could get worse, on FDI. But the larger issue that PKD needs to explain, who are these offshore tax havens, PKD? Have you read the report of Hindenburg? The biggest accusation against the group is that you got limited floating stock, and majority of them are controlled from Mauritius and different countries like UAE and Cyprus. And therefore, are you manipulating your own stocks and therefore raising your stock price and then pledging them as a collateral to raise more debt? I mean, that is the biggest worry for India at the moment.
That's why there should be a thorough probe. Uh, it's also a test for the government how it managed the crisis to ensure that there is no dent to the image of the market as far as transparency is concerned. Uh, uh, Madhavan Narayanan, would you agree?
Think it's not just a transparency issue. There are issues of processes and principles. These are the two words I often use because every institution, even a company, when it's a small company becomes a medium-sized company, there is an HR department, there is a finance department, and rules are laid down. When you're talking about a humongous institution, it's not about Adani. It has ceased to be about Adani. Mr. Adani had already lost a huge amount of wealth and face, and Sanjay Jha has explained very well what it means for country risk and all that. The real issue now is what are the processes and principles that may or may not have been violated by LIC and SBI or by the government authorities, because so many infrastructure contracts, I agree with PKD that Adani Mundra port existed before in Adani's portfolio. But if you see the portfolio growth of Adani companies, none of them in the recent 3-4 years except is more or less not greenfield. Most of them are acquisitions or in some way contracts. We need to examine that in detail. That is why a probe is needed. So the real questions are three. Did LIC follow any rule in equity purchase, not debt, equity purchase that violated principles of capital market allocation? Did SBI do anything that extended loans or offered collateral, less collateral loans or something like that that violated prudent principles of banking? Third, where government regulations or contracts rules in any way bent or amended or bypassed in order to give access to huge infrastructure contracts or projects for the Adani Group. So we are not talking about, I agree, we all agree that Gautam Adani is not India and India is not Adani. But what does it mean for a huge tribe of entrepreneurs and a global community of investors who are putting in their money and sweat and toil into this India story? And what does institutional conduct and rules and regulations mean for them and rule of law mean for all of us? And that has to be done. Now, last but not the least, it's not just enough for regulators to act. It's important for them to be seen acting transparently and fairly. So there should be no whispers. There should be no indications that the politically controlled regulation was used or something like that. Remember, CBI has been called a caged parrot by the Supreme Court of India in this country. We don't want more caged parrots in other institutions, whether it is SEBI or whether it is CAB or
PKD, you want to
watch it. Everybody will be watching. Last but not the least, let me say that this genie is out of the bottle. Everybody will be watching. We are talking about highly intelligent, some of them highly wealthy, and many of them full of integrity and knowledge. This is what has to be celebrated about this country. The government is not running the country. The country is running the government. Remember that.
PKD, you want to quickly comment before I give the last word to Basant Maheshwari?
See, well, I have been telling this. Maybe I may be one of the first person to tweet even that Adani is the success story. While we may have to celebrate every entrepreneur's or every enterprise's success stories, it is also important for that they have to be accountable to the government, law enforcement agencies, and even to the market. There is no doubt. My problem is something else. The problem is that rather than questioning the some amount of wrongdoings in the market or wherever it may be, even including what Sanjay Ji said about the Mauritius link to some other link, I am okay for that inquiry. It should be done. But the moment you make that a corporate entity's activity to a political purposes, that is where my problem is. You relate Adani to Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi do not have to be responsible for Adani's growth and failure. So that is where the problem is.
You have made your point. Basant Maheshwari, how do you see the situation developing here on?
I mean, I don't see anything magical happening on the positive side. If at all, it can just hold itself here and go downward. That is my assumption. But I'd like to make one more observation. There's so much of hullabaloo about Hindenburg shorting the bonds and then taking out the report. I think I would give them half a point extra for being transparent and saying that I've shorted the bonds. It's very normal. It's capitalism. If you've shorted the bonds, you've come and said, had they not told us that we are short on the bonds, I would have taken that as a point of sin or as a breakage of law. So I think because in India stock market isn't so well understood, we actually think, oh, ye paisa bana raha hai, ye short bhi gaya, paisa bhi bana raha hai, ye report bhi nikala. It's normal. It's very normal. We should take it as part of life.
Right. That brings us to the end of our show. Thanks to all our panelists for joining us today. That's all the time that we have. Thanks for watching.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.